Investigations are no fun. Dealing with suspicion, mistrust, and friction that often result from it can be a real challenge. So, naturally, everyone wants to avoid getting involved in an office investigation. However, most times, workplace investigations are unavoidable. Investigations in the workplace are usually conducted when there is credible evidence that there may have been weighty wrongdoing against an employee. Sometimes, a workplace investigation is also required even if there has not been an exact allegation against an employee or a specific department. It might just be a suspicion of wrongdoing. In cases like this, it is necessary to conduct an investigation in order to remove the possibility that a misdemeanor actually occurred within the company. A successful and effective investigation within the workplace serves to protect the interests of a company and its shareholders because of the following reasons. 1. It prevents and detects misconduct and violations. 2. It identifies areas of improvement required in the internal operations of the business. 3. It ensures that corporate activities align with applicable regulations and laws. For these reasons, an investigation is not carried out only to uncover enough facts to justify a result. An investigation is also not carried out just for record keeping. An investigation is conducted first to find facts. Workplace investigations also decide credibly and fully what actually happened with respect to a particular occurrence. The investigation serves to determine if the suspected conduct happened or not, the circumstances surrounding the conduct, the persons involved, and if company laws and policies were violated. A successful workplace investigation must be seen as being independent, thorough, and analytical. Here's how to conduct an investigation in the workplace. Step 1. Ensure that the confidentiality of the employee is in place. As an employer, you will need to make sure the confidentiality of the employee and his or her claim is properly in place to the best of your ability. While you do this, you'll also need to make sure a quick and effective investigation is carried out. As a result of this, it may not be 100% possible to keep all the information gathered during the initial complaint completely confidential. Information gathered could be from records and via interviews. Don't worry, all you need to do is ensure the complaining party and all the relevant persons involved know that all the information gathered will remain confidential as much as is practicably possible without hindering the course of the investigation. You will need to explain that a thorough investigation has been carried out. Also, you need to explain that in order to conduct an effective investigation, some information has to be exposed. This information will be revealed to only the accused party and to any witnesses present at the time. Assure the employee that this information will only be revealed on a need-to-know basis. Employers are advised not to promise complete confidentiality to any of the parties involved in the investigation. Step 2. Provide short-term protection. One of the first practical steps you may need to take is to provide immediate action to protect the alleged victim or accuser. To prevent further harassment or retaliation, the alleged victim may have to be separated from the accused. Employers can take actions such as a transfer or a leave of absence or changing work schedules. The complainant should not be unwillingly burdened or transferred. These types of actions may seem to be retaliatory and may lead to a retaliation claim. The employer and the accuser have to work together to arrive at a solution that works for both parties. Employers are allowed to seek legal advice if they wish prior to any decisions being made. Step 3. Select the investigator. The right investigator for the investigation conduct should possess the following qualities. 1. The ability to investigate objectively without prejudice. 2. The investigator should not have a personal relationship with any of the parties involved. The investigator should not have a stake in the outcome of the investigation. Also, the outcome should have no direct effect on the position of the investigator within the company. 3. The investigator should have skills that include prior knowledge of investigation and employment laws. 4. The investigator should have strong interpersonal skills which will be required to build a relationship with the parties involved. It will also help them to be perceived as fair and neutral. 5. They need to be attentive to details. 6. They need to possess the right temperament necessary to conduct investigative interviews. 7. The investigator should be able to maintain discretion. 8. They also need to be respected within the company because his or her conclusions will be used to determine the final outcome of the case. Also, they have the power to act as a reliable witness. Most employers tend to make use of the resources of experienced HR professionals or legal counsel within or outside the company. They also use internal security or a third-party investigator. There are unique advantages and disadvantages of each type of investigator which can be selected from. Step 4. Create a strategy for the investigation. A workplace investigation must be strategic and effective and properly executed. A complete plan should include an outline of the problem, the development of a witness list, and sources for evidence and information. The plan should also include interview questions that have been fashioned to obtain necessary information and key details. It should also include a process for holding documentation. For example, emails and interview notes can be used as evidence. The use of all the presented resources will enable the investigator to develop a proper plan. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission (EEOC) provides guidelines and definitions which can be used by employers. These topics include sexual harassment and discrimination. There are also a wide variety of online and print resources available to support and provide a step-by-step guide. Interview plan sample that can be used by an investigator. The amount of time and number of days it takes to complete a detailed investigation will be different and will depend on the circumstances. Here's an example of how an HR professional may decide to organize and finalize an investigation. Day 1. Please note the HR should have already booked a private conference room for the entire day. The investigator should allow time between interviews so notes can be typed and new information can be absorbed and digested. The investigator should also ensure the investigation flows as efficiently as possible. He or she may need to conduct interviews later or earlier in order to allow adequate time for the necessary information to be gathered. Depending on the number of witnesses involved and the amount of information provided, additional time may be required. 8 a.m. Interview the accuser in order to get more details and gather witnesses and evidence. 9 a.m. Read interview notes and fill in missing details while it's still fresh. This time can also be used to decide who should be interviewed next, whether the witness or the accused. 10 a.m. Interview the accused to hear his or her side of the story and to also gather witnesses and more evidence. 11 a.m. Complete notes. Prepare for the next interview. 1 p.m. Interview first witness. Use some time to complete the interview notes. 2 p.m. Interview the second witness. Use some time to complete the interview notes. 3 p.m. Interview third witness. Use some time to complete the interview notes. 4 p.m. Review notes taken over the course of the day and plan for the second day. Day 2. 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Finish any leftover witness interviews. Conduct any follow-up interview with the accuser, accused, and witnesses in order to elucidate any previously discussed information. They can also ask new questions concerning any information or evidence revealed after the initial interview. 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Review interview notes and any presented evidence and carry out a credibility assessment. Establish suggested recommendations for action for presentation to senior management. Day 3. Morning. Discuss proposed resolutions with senior management and decide on final outcome. Afternoon. Create any relevant disciplinary actions, memos, or warnings. Day 4. Morning. Hold closure meeting with the accuser and accused separately. Day 5. Develop questions for interviews. Questions should be developed ahead of time. It is recommended they are developed during the planning stage, even though additional questions will be added during the course of the investigation and more information and evidence are revealed. Questions that are considered good are designed to draw out facts without leading the interviewee, and they are also relevant. The questions should be open-ended to produce as much information as possible. The EEOC has sample investigation interview questions which can also help you in this process. Step 5. Carry out interviews. Once the proper investigator has been selected, an investigation plan has been created and interview questions have been developed, the interviews can be conducted. The investigator will need to inform all the involved parties about the need for an investigation and explain the investigation process to them. Care must be taken when stressing the confidentiality of the investigation process. This is because it can be viewed as an interference with the rights of the employee. The investigator should be focused on being objective and impartial so they can consider and gather only relevant facts. It is important that the investigation is not pushed in any particular direction. The investigator should never offer their own personal opinion or say anything to the interviewees. This is because doing any of these will discredit their impartiality. It is of absolute importance that objectivity is upheld during every interview. It is important that they take notes, seek opportunities for more evidence, and gather the names of additional witnesses while looking for inconsistencies in facts presented. One of the ways to check for and find inconsistencies is to ask the employee to write down what happened. Doing this will allow the investigator to spot any inconsistencies between what was written down and what was said during an interview. Investigators should be able to determine the credibility of an employee. Interviewees provide different stories and sometimes conflicting versions of the same event. It's also important to be acutely aware that the issues at hand are very personal to the parties involved in the investigation. Due to the emotional and personal nature of the issue, the individual's perceptions of the occurrence may be obscured by their personal interests. It's also possible that if their jobs are on the line, employees may be tempted to lie. This is the reason why the investigator must be willing to consider the credibility of the person being questioned during the interview process. The investigator can use techniques such as demeanor, inherent plausibility, ability, motive, past behavior, a motive to falsify, and past accusations in order to assess the employee's credibility. Investigators should apply caution when conducting an interview and avoid using any harsh interrogation tactics. This is to ensure they are not charged with coerced false confessions or false imprisonment. Step 6. Reach a conclusion. During the course of the investigation, the investigator must be careful and not jump into any conclusions before all the facts are presented. Once the interviews are completed, other important procedures such as a collection of evidence must be completed. Once credibility concerns have been resolved, the investigator will need to analyze all the information in order to make a formal recommendation. The investigator or management staff, in addition to legal counsel, will make the final determination of any employment actions which have been justified based on the report of the investigation. The employer, at this stage, will need to consider all the involved parties in addition to their organizational processes. All these factors will be applied in addition to whether the accused is guilty or not in the final determination. Step 7. Close the investigation. Once a final decision has been reached, the employer will need to notify both the accuser and the accused employee of the final decision. It is important the accuser is made to understand that the company took their complaint seriously and took the necessary action. It is important that the company ensures the accuser agrees that the company took their complaint seriously. They also need to agree that they were properly heard and understood even though they may not agree with the final outcome. The investigator will need to set a time frame to follow up with the accuser in order to make sure they have no further issues and they are settling back into their work schedule and environment. The employer is advised to encourage communication and follow up with the accuser to make sure they are comfortable and adjusting again. Lastly, the investigator should remind all involved parties to maintain confidentiality where it applies. Step 8. Develop a written summary of the investigation. Since it's very likely that investigations of a serious nature have the potential to be heard and reviewed in a court, the employer should prepare a final investigative report. The company should keep a clearly documented trail of the evidence collected. These include examining documents of previous employee incidents and past behaviors. The final report should sum up the following. 1. The incident investigated including dates. 2. The involved parties. 3. Critical, factual, and credibility findings including any sources referenced. 4. Employer guidelines or policies and how they applied to the investigation. 5. Specific conclusions. Inasmuch as no one fancies a workplace interrogation, most times, it is inevitable. The steps we have discussed in this video form the best strategy you can employ to ensure that your investigation is effective without turning into a witch hunt. Finally, the place of documentation can never be overemphasized. All necessary documents as mentioned earlier must be carefully prepared and filed for future reference, if necessary. Did you find this video helpful? Kindly subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so that you'll know once we post a new video. Also, drop your comment so we'll know your thought. Don't forget to check the description below for more details. Visit our website, officema.com for more office content like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.